Our next presenter is our title partner. We're going to bring Russ Colvin up on stage with Your Space America self-storage. And while Russ is coming on, just wanted to mention, well, first of all, thank you so much to Your Space America for all of their support. They've been a huge supporter of OZ Pitch Day over the last 2 years. Behind the scenes, I'm dealing day to day with William Billy Haiti. He's the executive chairman at Your Space America, and I have a great working relationship with Billy. It's been great working with him and his team. Russ, there you are. I think you are unmuted.
Good morning.
I can see you now. How are you doing, Russ?
Very good. Very good.
Good. And I'm going to be running your deck. Before we
Yes,
dive
sir.
into that deck, Billy actually asked that I show off some photos that he's recently gotten back from a couple of your sites, and maybe you can narrate these images here, kind of help explain what we're looking at. So I think this is Vegas, the Owens project, these first few photos.
Yeah, this is the Owens project, which we're going to discuss today, which started construction in December, and they have recently completed the slab, and now they're working on the steel framing for the first floor. We're expecting the project to be completed in December or January, and I'm going to talk about that project. There's another shot of the slab, about 40,000 square feet in the slab level. It's going to be a four-story building.
And then it was a couple months back, you had the ceremonial groundbreaking with you there on the far left, and then some of your team.
Actually, this was just a couple weeks ago that we had the, oh yeah, that's the groundbreaking actually several months ago for Owens that we celebrated. We try to do groundbreaking for every new project.
And now these next few photos will be from your Phoenix Stadium deal.
Yes. So this is we're going to talk about this project today. You can see the stadium in the background. This project is literally 650 feet from Diamondback Stadium. And when it's completed, will certainly be one of probably the nicest self-storage facility in the Phoenix market, certainly in the downtown market. We recently, about 2 weeks ago, had a groundbreaking for that property, and construction will begin in about a week.
Perfect. And if you're interested in learning more about these projects or the Tucson deal, I think you're also going to be presenting on today, although we don't have photos of that one in this.
We'll show you some renderings.
You'll see some renderings. Yeah. If you have any questions, you can get in touch with Russ or Executive Chairman at Your Space America, Billy Haiti. So let me get that presentation on screen now.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. My name is Russ Colvin. I'm CEO and president of Your Space America. We develop self-storage projects nationwide. Just a quick note about my background. I have been in the commercial real estate industry essentially my entire adult life, about 44 years, so I'm fairly new to it. I spent about half of that time on the lending side, and I spent about half on the investment side. And for the last 13 years, I've been exclusively self-storage. Have developed self-storage projects all over the country, from Massachusetts to New Jersey to California to Arizona to Las Vegas to Texas, all of which have been successful. As we will get into today, self-storage has become the most desirable commercial real estate investments in America. Indeed, it really has evolved into a core asset class for institutional investors, in large part due to its unmatched performance through all economic cycles. It is now regarded as a safe harbor investment, and our projects allow individual investors to invest and achieve institutional level returns. Self-storage has become really America's safest and strongest performing commercial real estate, which we will discuss. I'm often asked what we focus on in selecting development sites. We look for undersupplied markets, positive demographic story, and strong prospects for continued growth in the market. On today's presentation, we'll discuss our company in the self-storage industry, and then we'll review our 3 opportunity zone projects, and then we'll answer any questions that you may have at the end. Thank you. This is our first slide here. Okay, next slide. Disclosure, everybody should read through the disclosure. Next slide. As I alluded to at the beginning, Your Space America was really created to bring institutional level returns, best in class returns to individual investors. And we have a great team with an excellent track record, well established in the industry, with a history of producing best in class projects and a flawless record of performance for investors. Next slide. Our management teams, I mentioned our management team. We have a really diverse management team, people with experience in all areas of commercial real estate, from the acquisition side to the analysis side, to the tax side, to the investment side, the lending, every aspect. We have a great acquisition and underwriting team. They have been trained over a decade, and our team knows exactly what they're looking for in every project. And I think you'll see that as we get into these sites. Relationships, as I mentioned, we have great relationships in the industry, which allow us to bring these types of projects to our investors. Next slide. This is an interesting slide. Self-storage, a growing industry. You look here from 1988 to the current to 2023. Now 1 in 11 households essentially are currently renting a self-storage unit. And it has become increasingly popular for people basically across all age ranges and demographic ranges. And it is even becoming increasingly popular for businesses to lease self-storage space. So I think this graph speaks for itself. Next slide. As I mentioned, a growing industry. Interestingly, the top public companies, the top 6 operators with market cap of well over $100 billion, they only control about 17% of the properties. The rest is larger operators, but about 70% is individual owners. So that in itself creates a lot of opportunities. And the public companies manage the properties a lot better than the private operators, so they're able to deliver better returns, and we'll get more into that as we go on. Next slide. Another component of the self-storage industry, which makes it an especially attractive investment, is if you have an office building or you have a retail project and you have a vacancy, well, you're going to have downtime until you get a new tenant. You're going to have leasing commissions. You're going to have tenant improvements, all of those things. But in a self-storage project, you have low capex, so there's really nothing to do when your next tenant moves in. High profit margins in terms of the lowest break even of any commercial real estate class. Inflation protection, which allows managers to raise rates at any time, essentially. Diversified rent roll, that's another great aspect of self-storage investment. And these projects you're going to see today, we're going to have somewhere between 900 and 1,100 tenants. So you can just imagine we're certainly not dependent on any tenant, whereas in some commercial properties, you may be completely dependent on a handful of tenants. And if something happens to one of them, it have negative consequences for the project. Low delinquency rates. I mean, one of the reasons people pay their rent on time in storage facility is it's easy for the manager to lock them out of their unit. So all of these things really contribute to self-storage being, as many people say, a fairly foolproof investment. Next slide. As you'll see from this slide, about 40% of the tenants stay for less than a year, about 40% or between or longer than 2 years, and about 20% between 1 and 2 years. And in terms of demographics, the most popular demographic basically is from 30 to 70 for renting self-storage facilities. And if you see over here on the right, almost 60% of the tenants now come from the internet. So they were literally can go on the internet, find a space they want. They can lease the space on the internet. They can come to the facility. They'll have a code to get in, and they can access their unit during normal business hours. We make it, it's called contactless rentals, contactless. It also allows to manage a project with less people as well. Next slide. REIT sector fundamentals. I've always found this interesting. Next slide. For the last 31 years, self-storage has outperformed every type of property in the NAREIT index. And that includes office, industrial, retail, residential, diversified, healthcare, timber, you name it, data centers, specialties. For 31 years, on average, has outperformed every sector. Next slide. This slide really kind of tells the story. Over here on the right is self-storage, and to the left are all the other property types. And that, as I say, really tells the story. Next slide. This is an interesting slide, and what really fascinating thing about self-storage is how it performed during the pandemic. And you can see this is basically the way it performed during the pandemic. It by far outperformed every other type of real estate. It was very popular during the pandemic, and it was a product type that people could have access to and people used. Anyway, as I say, it speaks for itself. Next slide. It's another interesting thing. These are the top 10 institutional shareholders in Public Storage, which is the largest publicly traded self-storage REIT as of September of 23. But you can see some of the largest investors in the world on an institutional basis have multi-billion-dollar positions, such as Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, Capital Investors, and all these other investors you see here, which are household name investors, have major positions. And that tells you, I think, where the smart money is in terms of investing in self-storage. Next slide. This next slide is Extra Space, which is the second largest publicly traded self-storage REIT in the country. And again, you see multiple institutional quality investors with multi-billion-dollar positions in Extra Space. So it tells you these major investors own something like half of the stock. So very popular with institutional investors, and which we call the smart money, right? Next slide. This has always been an interesting fact about self-storage. Delinquency rates. You see the blue graph, that is all other property types. And then down on the bottom, you see in green is self-storage. Has a long history, going back decades, of having extremely low delinquency rates in terms of loans. So someone that owns a self-storage facility, the likelihood of them being delinquent on a loan is extremely low. Even now, there's just a handful of facilities that are delinquent. It's really an amazing fact of self-storage, but it speaks to the quality of the asset type. Next slide. We will get more into this during the presentation, but I like to tell people we run a tight ship in terms of our development process, contractor selection. You know, we use the top contractor in the United States. We have additional liability insurance on every project. We have site security on every project. We have online project monitoring. So if you're an investor in one of our projects, we'll give you access to the cluster system, and you can go on every day and see the photographs for the progress at the site. In some cases, we get cameras on the site so you can see it live. We have weekly project management conference calls with our contractor. We're sticklers for site safety, and we monitor project schedules very closely. So as I say, we run a tight ship. Next slide. So I mentioned we use Arco Murray, who is really the largest contractor in the United States in self-storage, someone we have a long relationship with. And on most of our projects now, I've used all of the REITs, but we've been using Public Storage, which, as I mentioned, is the largest owner of self-storage in the world, with about 3,000 properties, and they're very good managers. And so that's why we use them. We obviously are the asset managers. We supervise them, but they are great managers. Next slide. So now we get into some of the projects. Next slide. This first project is our Tucson project. And this project, I like to tell people, is located literally on a freeway on-ramp in Tucson with 90,000 vehicles per day on that road. And as you can see from the signage, anybody literally driving by from any direction is going to see that. And across the freeway from this property is one of the most successful retail centers in in Tucson, 1.2 million square feet power center, which draws tens of thousands of people every week to the property. And of course, all those people that come to the shopping center will see the property as well. So I tell people this is going to be the most visible self-storage facility in Tucson when it's finished. Next slide. Another rendering of the property. Again, you can see the signage. You can see the highway. Next slide. Another view of the property. Is really going to be an extremely attractive property. Literally, I think it'll be the nicest in Tucson when it's finished. Next slide. This is going to be an approximately 958 unit facility. We expect our building permits in the second quarter, and we expect groundbreaking in the second quarter. We are the sponsor, obviously, with a history of successful commercial projects. This is going to be a state-of-the-art Generation 5 facility, institutional quality. In addition to being climate control, it's going to have a state-of-the-art security system that'll be professionally monitored. So safety is a very important thing in terms of the facilities that we developed, which will guard against any unauthorized intrusion into the building. And everybody who enters the building will have a code so they can get into the building. So when you store things in here, they're very safe. Next slide. As I mentioned, this project is in Tucson, Arizona. It's approximately 130,000 square feet, and we're going to have approximately 97,000 square feet of net rentable area. The 3 and 5 mile populations, which is something we look at closely, are strong at 110 and 206,000 feet respectively. It's an undersupplied self-storage market. And a lot of the facilities in this market are older facilities. So we believe we will have a major qualitative advantage in this market in terms of having one of the best properties in the market. So I mentioned located on the interstate highway across from a major power retail center. Next slide. Next slide. This slide gives you a view of where it will be located. You can see the power retail across the freeway from our site. But literally it is located on a freeway on-ramp to the interstate highway. Next slide. This gives you the northbound and southbound traffic numbers on the interstate from Irvington, which is the street out front. Next slide. This slide shows you really the population growth in Pima County and in the state of Arizona. It's very strong. Something we look at on every project is we want, solid population growth. And this area certainly has that. Next slide. This next slide again has some of the traffic numbers throughout the area, but again, very strong. Next slide. A lot of people don't know this, but Tucson is actually the headquarters of U.S. Army intelligence. It also is the capital, really, in the United States for developing satellites of all types of satellites, the glass for satellites, and which is a big part of the economy. The Air Force is also a large part of the economy here. So the military is a big part of the economy in Tucson, and that is only expected to continue growing. Of course, tourism is another major industry, but definitely a growing area, the Tucson market. Next slide. This next slide talks about the total project cost, the total equity we're raising, which is about 6.45 million. Stabilized NOI, the average projected returns about 20.7% annually to investors. Investor equity multiple of 5.9, and an estimated hold period of about 120 months, long enough for our investors to achieve their benefits of the opportunity zone. Next slide. This is the site plan for the property, and again, you see Interstate 19, and then you see our property. So it speaks for itself. Next slide. This next property is our Las Vegas project, and we have limited availability in this. It's nearly sold out. So if you have an interest, please feel free to contact me directly on this, and we can talk about what your needs are. This is another project with a high visibility location, located less than 200 feet from Interstate 15, with about 177,000 vehicles per day and about 14,000 on Owens Avenue. So traffic of about 190,000 daily. And strong population numbers, a 3 mile of about 174,000, a 5 mile of about 542. This again will be a Class A institutional quality facility. This is the one you saw the photos of initially, with the concrete slab, 158,000 square feet and about 116,000 square feet of net rentable area, about 1,163 units. This is an undersupplied market. This will be a Generation 5 facility with state-of-the-art security, and there is a big demand in this area for self-storage, and this property will meet some of that demand. It's probably undersupplied in the 2 mile radius by at least 600,000 square feet. So we're hopeful that this project will lease up quickly, will be very popular in this market. Next slide. The Las Vegas market, you know, there's a reason why the Raiders and the Oakland A's Raiders went there, the Oakland A's are going there. Just the growth in the market, the pro-business environment. If you spend some time in Las Vegas and you see the growth story over the last 25 years, it really is amazing. Very low unemployment, very low multifamily vacancy rates. The great market for self-storage. Construction commenced, as I indicated, as of December of 2024. Next slide. Another rendering of the property. Again, extremely attractive property, nicer than anything in the market. Next slide. As I mentioned, we've already discussed the project size, estimated rents on average starting at about $1.70, stabilized NOI of nearly 2.4 million. We acquired the site in October of 23. We obtained all of our building permits in July. Construction started in December, should end by January of 26. And we expect full stabilization in the second quarter of 28 or before. And as you see down here, we're raising about 10.3 million in equity, having about 13 million in debt. Next slide. This next slide goes into the total project cost, total equity and debt, stabilized NOI, an occupancy at about 93%, projected IRR of 25.42%, investor equity multiple of 561, and a hold period of about 120 months, again, to allow investors to receive the full benefits of the opportunity zone. Next slide. Again, 1,163-foot facility. I covered the timing. Again, this will be a Generation 5 facility with state-of-the-art security, a major qualitative addition to the market. Next slide. All of our due diligence, of course, is completed, geotechnical, analyzed the market very carefully. We selected Darko Murray as a contractor. All entitlements are in place. And As I said, we expect completion by December or January of 2026. Local area, next slide. You can see Interstate 15, and then you see the little red oval there, our property, and the proximity, as I said, less than 200 feet from the interstate. Next slide. This is something I mentioned, supply. It's a very undersupplied market. Even after this project is completed, you'll have some significant undersupply in the 2 mile. And in the 3 mile, you again will have significant undersupply. So again, that creates the perfect environment for our property to thrive in this market, being the top facility in the market that's undersupplied. Next slide. This next slide shows our facility here with the red dot, and then the potential 2 competitors that may be coming online, but not a lot of potential competition in the 3 mile radius. And the Charleston self-storage project has still not been built yet. And there's some questions as to whether or not they're going to get their building permit extended. So there may only be 1 coming on in a 3 mile radius. So we don't expect a lot of competition coming online. Next slide. Again, another map that shows you basically where the facility is located in the overall geographic area. Next slide. This is the site plan. As you can see to the right, you have Interstate 15 to the left with the red dot is our property. Next slide. Close-up site plan of the property, and the design will have loading areas in the front and the sides and the back. So it'll be very accessible. We have 2 elevators, so it should be very convenient for our tenants to access their units, which is something that's quite important. Next slide. This next slide is interesting. We discovered that if you're within 200 feet of an interstate, you can ask for permission to put in an 80-foot sign, up to an 80-foot sign. So we went to the city. It took about a year, and we got permission recently to put in an 80-foot sign, and these simulations / renderings will show you what the sign will look like from the interstate highway, and it's pretty staggering, really. As I say, nobody will miss this property from the interstate highway. Next slide. This is another simulation rendering from the interstate a little further back, but again, nobody's going to miss it. Another rendering going from the other direction. Extremely visible. Next slide. Another rendering from even further away. Next rendering, even further away, still visible. Next slide. Well, that ends the Las Vegas presentation. Now we will go to the Phoenix presentation. And the Phoenix project also has limited availability. So if there's an interest in this, contact me directly. Okay. This is a project, you saw the groundbreaking ceremony photos and the proximity to the stadium. This will be, when it's finished, again, the nicest facility in the Phoenix market. We expect construction to commence on March 17th. We had our groundbreaking. This facility will be 50 feet high. So imagine we have the stadium down the street, and we have 7th Street, which is a major ingress and egress arterial for downtown Phoenix. And this is another property that nobody will miss it from the stadium or from 7th Street. It'll probably be the most well-known facility in downtown Phoenix. Interesting thing about the Phoenix market, while there's a new public storage nearby, most of the properties in this market are older. A lot of them are non-climate. So again, this will be a major qualitative addition. This facility will be 166,000 square feet with about 124,000 feet of net rentable, about 1,245 units. And again, it's state-of-the-art Generation 5 facility, high security. The population here is strong in the 3 mile and 5 mile, 100,000 and 362,000. There are also, this is part of the growth story that we look for in markets, there's about 17,000 residential units in planning or development within a 5 mile radius of the property, which should add probably another 50,000 people. So we're excited about this project. And again, we're using Arco Murray as the contractor and Public Storage as the manager. Next slide. Another rendering of the project. Really, it's going to be a beautiful project, highly visible from all around the area. Next slide. As I had mentioned, 1,245 units, first quarter groundbreaking, which has already happened, 166,000 facility. And again, a Generation 5 facility, institutional quality. Next slide. This is another view from the site of Diamondback Stadium, as you can see. And then you can see the road up there, 7th Street, which at the top of 7th Street, you can look right over and see our property. So interestingly, we lucked out there. Next slide. One of the things we look at, of course, as I mentioned, is competition and the area. And this is an area in the last 10 years that has been a major growth story in terms of the development. It is the capital of Arizona, so a short distance from our property is the capital of the state of Arizona, which is an interesting building. If you're ever there, we'll have to go visit the Capitol. Phoenix City Hall is nearby. As I mentioned, adjacent obviously to Chase Field and a lot of other major tenants, the convention center, everything nearby. The University of Arizona, Arizona State have had major expansions in this area in the last 10 years. They have a major presence in downtown. And in the self-storage industry, college students are some of the best tenants you can have, and we have tens of thousands of them in downtown Phoenix. So if they're looking for a safe place, it will be in downtown Phoenix. We don't see any more new competition. We researched potential competition and why there was some potential competition. None of them really were able to develop. There may be only one that might be coming online, but very limited potential new competition. One of the things is, of course, there's not many areas to build something. So there's not many vacant lots in this area because it's so highly developed. One of the other major things that's been developed in the last few years here is residential towers, multifamily and condominiums in the downtown market. So that has expanded the market as well. So we will have the best facility in the fourth largest city in the United States, fifth largest city in the United States, in the downtown market. So really should be a great success story. Next slide. This slide shows really the growth of the Phoenix MSA since 1980. It's now over 5 million. In 1980 it was 1.6. So it really tells you something about the growth in the economy. As you know, there's a lot of economic growth going on there tied to government projects, computer chips, all kinds of growth stories like that in terms of development in downtown Phoenix. Next slide. This next slide is the overall returns. Project cost about 28 million. We're raising equity of about 11.3, debt of about 16.9, stabilized NOI of 3 million, IRR projected at 24.5, investor equity multiple of 5.12, anticipated hold period again of about 120 months so that the investors can achieve the tax benefits of the opportunity zone. Next slide. This is a site plan of the property. Obviously, it's a rectangular design with all the loading in the front. And given the rectangular design and multiple elevators, it should be very easy for tenants to access their units. And that does it for the presentation today. Can answer any questions you may have. I once again thank everyone for taking the time to see our presentation today. I'm available at any time to answer your questions by email or phone. We'll also have a breakout session, as I indicated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Russ. Always great hearing from Your Space America Self-Storage. Really great looking projects you have there in Nevada and Arizona. We've actually run out of time in the main session here for questions.
Sorry.
We're a couple minutes over. I got to get to
Sorry.
our panel. No problem. So here's how this is going to work, everybody. We're going to split the day into two different tracts right now. Russ, you're going to be heading into your breakout session. And Russ, I've emailed you that link, so you should have it at the top of your inbox right now. Just
Okay.
click on that and head on over there. For
I
everybody
will.
else,
Thank you all very much.